Hi everyone, welcome to Belle's Books. I'm Carly and today I'm going to be doing my belated August wrap up with you. So I've got 5 books to talk to you about, 5 books that I read in August and a little bit. Finished some of them in September, but you know, that's the way it goes. I very rarely read a whole load of books in their entirety in 1 month. I always have like runovers. And also I have one book that I did not finish, so it's kind of on hold for now. So this was the month of the overly ambitious readathons, and as predicted, I did not do very well. So I didn't read anything for the History Challenge readathon. I just didn't get around to it. The first book I'm going to talk about is No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. This is the hardcover without the dust jacket, because that's how I received it. Now, I was reading this for the Women's Prize shortlist reading, and obviously it's been everywhere, so you probably know what it is about. I will do a quick summary. It is a book of two halves. It is about the internet and the way that we live our lives on the internet, specifically, I think, Twitter. So this is a fiction, but it is kind of auto-fiction. I knew nothing about Patricia Lockwood. I knew she was a poet, and you can tell that when you start reading this. The writing style is by turns poetic, beautiful, and funny. So it is a commentary on our online presence and the way that social media and living online affects us as humans, and the way that we interact with one another. So that's all well and good. The second part of the book is more to do with a family tragedy and the way that our main character then kind of has to come off, not necessarily totally offline, but she lives more in the moment, in the real world, with the people, with her family that are experiencing this tragedy, and what that does to the way that she views her life. Now, I did enjoy this book. I felt like a lot of it went over my head, partly because the references were very much to do with Twitter, and like if you're not part of that ongoing everyday, I want to say barrage, which I'm not. I only use Twitter when I'm at an academic conference. I don't know why I'm holding this up, because it's just a plain white book. So I very rarely go on Twitter. I find it overwhelming. I only use it for academic stuff when I'm doing a PhD, when I'm doing something to do with my PhD, or I'm at an academic conference. So I think a lot of the references went over my head. I just didn't get a lot of the stuff. Also, this is American, so there are American references that also went over my head. So there, I felt like I was a bit outside of the text. I didn't quite get it a lot of the time. When there were things that I understood, when she was referencing like a meme. Is it meme or is it mem? One of my friends said that she pronounced it memes, which I really like. When it was something that I recognised, I went, oh yeah, I know what that is. Ha ha ha, I can laugh along on that because I get it. But a lot of the time, I didn't get it. So it was a kind of a bit of a hit and miss for me. And lots of people said the second part of the book was very emotional, and it was. I wasn't expecting. I was like, I rarely cry at books, okay? I very rarely cry at books. Ali Smith Summer is the exception. But I got to the end. I did not cry at the end of the book. Then I read the acknowledgements, and I realised just how autobiographical this book was. This basically, the second half of the book is describing something that actually happened to Patricia Lockwood, albeit like certain elements were fictionalised. But I think once I realised that it was actually real, I don't know, something just made me go burr, and I cried a lot when I realised that this was a real thing that had happened, and it was very sad. So I found it very affecting at that point. Strange that I didn't find it well, I did find it affecting as a fiction, but there was something about that change from me understanding it as, oh, this is just a fiction, to this happened in real life, made me feel incredibly sad. So for me, the second part of the book was the strongest part, just because I felt like I could understand it better. Like the first half, not so much. The other thing that I enjoyed about reading this book was, the reason this book doesn't have its dust jacket is because it was gifted to me by my lovely friend Dickon Edwards. Dickon is an absolute diamond of a geezer. He is not a geezer. He is a lovely guy. You may know him. He's a diarist. He writes an online diary. I will link it down below. Check it out. He's also been in a band and is just generally a good person. He sent me this book. He had read it and he had annotated it. And tell you what I really loved. I loved reading this, and I loved reading his annotations. Some of them I couldn't read because, you know, some of them, his handwriting was a bit like, I can't see what you've written there, Dickon. But I really enjoyed the process of reading this book and reading someone else's annotations. And I annotate my books as well. And so I'd put my annotations alongside Dickon's. And some of them I wrote an annotation to his annotation. So something that he had reflected on, and then I wrote back to it. And I found that a really amazing reading process. Just something I'm throwing out there. So that was really good. And the thing that did make me laugh, but I'm not going to find it now, when he was not impressed when Patricia Lockwood was singing the praises of Tom York and Radiohead. He'd kind of underlined something, gone, ah, and then another part going, oh dear. That made me laugh a lot, more than the actual book probably. So I enjoyed reading this. The reading process is very much, probably more so than the actual book, if that's a weird thing to say, but there you go. The second book I finished was Strange Weather in Tokyo by Hiromi Kawakami, and I read that for Women in Translation Month. I don't have it with me because it's a library copy and I've taken it back. I will insert a picture here. Now, this was a strange book. I was really in the mood to read some Japanese fiction. I can't remember, the only other one I've read is Convenience Store Woman, which is down there, by Sayaka Murata. I really enjoyed that. So I was down for some Japanese fiction. This book is about the relationship between two people. One is a woman in her 30s. I think she's in her 30s. And her name is, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Tsukiko, I think. And she bumps into her old high school teacher, who she has forgotten the name of, so she just calls him Sensei, which is like Japanese for teacher. And it is about their relationship and the way that it's very odd. They just bump into each other in this bar or in various places, and it kind of develops from there into a kind of a love story, but I felt very uncomfortable with that. Even though she's in her 30s, he's obviously a lot older than her. It wasn't so much the age gap, it was the fact that she was his student. Sorry, a boat is going past on the river, that's what that noise is. She was his student and he remembers her from school, and there's a line in it where he says something like, he says, oh, your name is Tsukiko, and he said he looked her up in the yearbook, and it just made me feel quite uncomfortable, that relationship. And for a long time it was a friendship, and they just met up and they had they go to this bar and they just eat and drink sake together, and I was on board for all the food writing. The food writing in this book is exquisite. It will make you very hungry and it will make you want to eat Japanese food. So I was very pleased with that. It was just the relationship between the two of them I felt a bit weird, and as it kind of progressed, and it wasn't till right towards the end where they kind of get together, if you will, it just made me feel a bit icky and uncomfortable. There is commentary there on loneliness and you know, being solitary and needing someone else. But I just felt, I don't know, it was so weird. Like, there was this other guy that was her age that wanted to take her out, and he seemed really nice, and she just was not going for him. And I was like, go for that guy, because he seems like a nice guy, not this old dude. So it was a weird reading experience. I did enjoy that book. Would I read more by that author? Probably. Just not down for that weird student-teacher relationship. Not my bag. Okay, so then, right, let's talk about Second Place by Rachel Cusk, which I read because I got it out from the library before it hit the book along list, and it had a lot of reserves on it, so I had to get it back, which is why I don't have it with me. I really enjoyed the first part of this book. I started reading it and I was like, the writing is really beautiful. It's kind of deep, it's philosophical, it's very interior. Let me tell you what it's about first, come on. It is about this woman who is known as M. She lives in a marshland area, which I took to be the Fens, and she says she's not wealthy, but I think there was some, I said this before, there's some money there. She's comfortable. She doesn't work. Her husband, who owns this land, basically just like looks after the land. So they've got some money. She's also got a second property, the second place on this land, that she uses to invite artists and writers to come and be creative in her space and do their thing. It's all very reflective on art, creativity, and is very philosophical. Great. I don't mind that. But the more I read of this book, the more I didn't like it. I just felt like it was very indulgent. That's next door's dog howling on cue, of course. I felt like it was indulgent. Yes, the writing was good. Obviously, Rachel Cusk can write. But I just found it really frustrating because it was just like privileged white woman problems. And I think we've had enough of that, you know. I kind of get that it was a reflection on art and individuality and wanting to see something of yourself in art and creativity, but I don't know, it just didn't work for me, man. And the Jeffers thing, the narration is told by M to a person called Jeffers. Either you don't know whether it's a letter or whether she's speaking to Jeffers, but that really started to bug me after a while. I was like, because she says it too much. It's just like, Jeffers, this happened, Jeffers, and then he did this, and Jeffers. And I was like, you would never do that. You would never, if you're talking to someone, keep saying their name. If you're writing to someone, you would never keep writing their name. Just, that pulled me out of the story and was so annoying. The thing that made me think about this book, because it's about an artist that comes to stay at the second place, and the artist is an absolute arrogant asshole, and it is about the privilege of white men, and particularly white men creatives. And he is horrible to M, who is giving him this place to stay in. And I just found it so frustrating. And the more I read, the more I kept thinking about that film, The Mother. Have you seen it? If you've not seen it, don't watch it, okay? Do not watch that film, because it is the worst film I have ever watched. That's 2 hours of my life I'm never getting back. I went to cinema to see that and I was absolutely enraged. I know it had lots of critical acclaim, but it was bullshit, right? Much like this book. I'm sorry, Rachel Cusk. The thing is, I thought Rachel Cusk was going to be one of those writers that I really loved, and I'm not going to write her off. I've got the Outline trilogy. I'm still going to read it. Maybe it's going to piss me off, but I don't know. This book just really pissed me off towards the end, and I was just like, you keep giving and giving to this guy, and he's taking and just being an arsehole. And this woman wants something from him. She wants a connection with this artist. She wants him to capture this marshland that she finds so beautiful, this landscape, this place that she lives in, and she wants him to paint it or capture some kind of essence of it, and with it, the essence of her, and he just refuses to engage with her, acknowledge her. He avoids her at all costs. He paints all of her family, her husband and her daughter, and her daughter's arrogant partner. he interacts with all of them, but he just completely avoids her. And when he does interact with her, he is just horrible to her and says really horrible things. But still, she keeps going over and above for him. And I just, like, first of all, I couldn't fathom it. I was like, well, just kick him out. He's being a right douchebag. And then right at the end, when I finished the book, and there's an author's note to say the premise of this book was based on a memoir by, I should have looked this up, I've now forgotten her name, a woman who did something similar, and she let D.H. Lawrence come and stay with her in so, like a similar setup to the second place. And so now that I wish I'd kind of known that at the beginning of reading the book. I now want to read that memoir. Even though I did not like Second Place and I found it infuriating, I want to read the memoir that it was based on, because I don't know, it just felt like, oh, it kind of fell into place a little bit. Wish I'd known that at the beginning. I don't know how that would have affected my reading, if at all, but my God, I just found it infuriating. The premise of someone coming into a space that is yours, taking over, destroying it, like The Mother. That film, man alive, that film wound me up. And just completely decimating another person. It was not good. Anyway, let's calm down and move on from that, Jeffers. The next two books I'm going to talk about in tandem. I finished a book that I've been reading since 2019 because it was for my book club. I finished reading Invisible Women, Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men by Criado-Perez. I started this ages ago, like I said, in 2019. And I'd read a few chapters of it, but it was chosen for my book club, so I had to finish it. I found this a bit of a slog. When I first started reading it, I thought, this is fascinating, this is so interesting. What she does is she looks at various aspects of the way our world is designed, the way that our social, political, cultural structures are set up, to engage with the fact that there is a massive data gap in terms of the way that we look at data between male and female, and we don't disaggregate that data. So she looks at various aspects of things like medical trials. There's things in here that scared the shit out of me, to be honest. Things in here that I learned a lot from this book, okay? I found it very fascinating. Clearly a lot of research has gone into here. There is a lot of data. And that's the bit I found difficult, because she evidences everything she makes a claim about. She gives you lots of data to back it up. Most of this book is notes where she's referencing things. Let me show you just how much, because you feel like, oh, this book is massive, but actually most of it is the notes section. All of this is the data and the evidence that she provides to back up all of her assertions. So the medical trials thing really astounded me, because it's looking at the way that, sorry, I'm losing my voice, the way that medical trials take place, and that there is not equal proportion of male to female participants. Even there's usually mostly male participants, and when there is a split between male and female participants, the data is not sex disaggregated, so there is no record, or very little record, of how women respond differently to like drug trials to men. And when that is done, the evidence there seems to suggest that it is completely different. So women's bodies are obviously very different to men's bodies. And she talks about this, not just the fact that we have certain items on our bodies that are different to men, but at a cellular level, so the way that women respond to drugs can be completely different to the way that men respond to drugs. The way that women have heart attacks is completely different to the way that men have heart attacks. And because of that data gap, women are suffering. They're not getting the right care. They are dying disproportionately. They are not getting drugs which are not approved because they don't work on men. So they're not approved for use when they do work on women, but they're not tested well enough. That just kind of blew my mind. So there's things like that that are really scary. Also, there's a line in here about, you know, data that isn't collected about the way that pregnant women's bodies function in terms of medical trials, which, you know, I found it. Let me read this to you. We should be routinely and systematically tracking, recording and collating pregnant women's health outcomes, but we aren't, not even during pandemics. During the 2002 SARS outbreak in China, pregnant women's health outcomes were not systematically tracked, and consequently, the World Health Organization points out, it was not possible to fully characterize the course and outcome of SARS during pregnancy. Another gender data gap that could have been so easily avoided, and information that will be lacking for when the next pandemic hits. And don't we know it? My gosh. So, you know, some of this stuff is hard to read, but it goes into things that you're just not expecting. Like, she talks about the way that towns are planned and designed, the built environment, the way that buildings are designed around men, the way that towns are structured, transport routes are structured for men. And I was like, how can that be? But she breaks it down to such a level where she's talking about men's journeys going to work for a 9-to-5 job, women's journeys taking children, visiting sick elderly parents, because that generally falls on women. They do lots of different shorter journeys, which costs more. It's just things that you just don't think about. And I learned so much from this. The problem was the amount of data. It felt a bit like wading through treacle, because she's like, this statistic, this evidence, and it's just like, okay, I get it. You've done the research. I get it. One of the criticisms of this book is that it is very essentialist. It is based on a split between gender binaries, or sex binaries, as in male bodies, female bodies. So there is, obviously, there's a problem there in terms of what that leaves out in terms of the trans experience. Also, it is very white woman feminism. It is very capitalist feminism, which is why I'm going to bring in the other book now I would like to speak to you about. I read this alongside, I've already spoken about this, A Decolonial Feminism by Françoise Vergès, which is much smaller. But this kind of has, again, it's so dense, there's so much in it. And I would recommend, if you're going to read this, to kind of temper it with this. This is a really great book, because it looks at civilizational feminism, which is basically what's going on in here. So in this book, she talks about the way that feminism, white woman feminism, has been kind of co-opted into the capitalist framework to demand assimilating into patriarchal structures. So this book is very much saying women are left out of the way that the world is built, and we need to be considered and brought into it. This book is saying deconstruct the whole damn lot, take the whole thing down, because it's causing all forms of injustice, mostly for Black and indigenous women and women in the global South. And civilizational feminism is basically the premise that, you know, we want a seat at the table. We want to be earning as much money. And one of the things that I found difficult in here is when she talks about economics and, you know, the fact that women's work in terms of housework and care work that is not paid, the amount of unpaid labour that women do in the home, in their own homes, and also the devaluing of that kind of work when it is paid out in the world. And she's arguing for the fact that it should be on equal measure, and if women were paid for their own household labour, or if household labour was universalised and paid for, then women could go out into the workforce and the economy would be boosted. And I was just like, that did not sit well with me. This was much better, because it was talking about how capitalism is a harmful system. Of course, that's my kind of feminism. I'm down for that. So I would say this is very informative, but you need to temper it with something that is not just looking at specifically white European women, and that is this book. I've spoken about this a little bit in a different video. Also, there is an interview with Françoise Vergès and Lola Olafemi that talks about this book. I linked it in my other video, but I'll link it again down below because it's so good. So do check this one out. If it's a recommendation between this one or this one, go for this one. But this is fascinating. So just kind of balance it out, you know, balance it out. So those are the books that I read in August. The one that I didn't finish was Love in Colour by Bolu Babalola. I started reading this for Simon's summer book hibernation, and I read 3 stories in it, and they were good, but I didn't feel compelled to carry on with it. I'm going to carry on with it, but I'm not like going to race through it and try and finish it. It's probably going to be one that I pick up here and there. This is just love stories, various different love stories, and on a par with what Jem Campbell said, I think I just don't like love stories, which I kind of already knew because I don't read romance, but when it's very kind of happy love stories, I'm too much of a cynic. So yeah, also because these are based on mythical tales from around the world, I was expecting some kind of explanation of what they were based on, and there wasn't that. So I felt like, oh well, yeah, that's a great story, but I want to know what it's based on, or how you've changed it, or what you've done that's different. So the only one that I could kind of understand was the most recent one I read, Psyche, because it was based on like Greek myth, and I know a little bit about Greek myth, but not much. The others, I wanted to know more. I wanted a little like synopsis of what the original story was and so that I could see what she'd done that was different. So yeah, the writing style is good. Like I say, I felt like I just didn't really resonate, didn't connect with it as much. So I will plug on through these stories, but pick them up here and there. I'm not in a rush to get through it. Okay, those are the books that I read in August. Tell me if you have read any of these, please. Particularly, let's talk about second place and Jeffers if you want to get us mad. So I was. Also, about that comparison with The Mother, if you've seen The Mother, talk to me in the comments below. Do you know what I mean? Yes, does that make sense? Anyway, don't get mad about it, it's fine. The next video I'm going to do is probably going to be a September TBR, even though we're halfway through September. I'm all over the place. I've still got a ridiculous amount of library books. The next book I'm about to read is The Prophets, because that's got to go back very soon. I've got all of these library books that have reserves on, so I've got to try and race through them and get them back. Also, my library is dropping down the maximum amount of books that you're allowed to take out, which is usually 12. At the moment, it's 24. So of course I've maximised that. I've got 17 books out at the moment. So I need to get that down to 12 and stop reserving things, because then they come in and I'm like, oh, I need to read this now, quick. Anyway, yes, this video is going on, so shut up, Carly. Talk to me in the comments below. Tell me what you've been reading. Tell me if you've read any of these, or I'm sorry if I've put you off second place or any of the others. Also about those feminism books, talk to me about those as well. Just talk to me. I would like to chat in the comments, please. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time. Bye, everyone.